Why do we make problems? What is that all about? Let's do a closer examination on why this is and what is going on. Many of our problems are inventions from our mind. This is due to a lack of critical thinking into our beliefs and the authority we give to them. Richard Dawkins talked about this in his book, The Selfish Gene, that even seemingly innocent to not so innocent beliefs or ideas, or rather ideals, can possess us. They can hijack our mind and think for us. When there is no study and investigation in this, we believe something is true, and then we convince ourselves it's real. This is a misuse of our imagination, and often is the reason how and why our beliefs can turn on us. This is such a crucial thing, so how can we possibly overlook it? What if we had a microscope that could zoom in on this question as if it were a cell of the nucleus, so as to be able to see more closely what exactly is going on and what the mechanics of this machine is made up of? If we can understand this pattern, then we can feel less at the mercy of it. It's important to not let emotions get in the way of this exploration. It is understandable that one can get emotional when looking at this process. It's not very pleasant after all. But can we think about this process while observing our emotional responses as well? Can we be emotional and logical at the same time, rather than just one or the other? Many of us have been conditioned to think we must always be right and be important. But the more we cling to this ideal, the more a battle ensues within us, because with this belief system, like all belief systems, there is the opposite, such as, I am shit and I am wrong. To feel the need to be right or the fear to be wrong, or think we are always wrong, is a vicious circle. With the need of proving to be right or wrong to others comes with it the need to prove by doing stupid or negligent things, such as, they think I am bad, I will show them how bad I can be, or they think I am right, so I have to always be right no matter what. Proving it to ourselves is not enough. We make it even more complex by convincing ourselves that we have to prove this idea of who we think we are to others as well. The reason we do this is for the reward and goal, which is the satisfaction of being right and getting consensus for this. But this satisfaction is often short-lived because no proof and satisfaction is enough to last. Sooner or later, we get the same old thoughts of needing to prove, and the whole cycle continues again. We become a slave to this cycle, and it's very exhausting. But if we were to zoom in even closer on this cycle, we can see that we are not just addicted to proving ourselves. We are addicted to something else too. Proving our psychological proofs are real, meaning we often root for our familiar interpretations and meanings. Why do we have to take meaning so personally? Consciously and unconsciously, we associate self-esteem with meaning, and meaning with self-esteem. And all of this feeds the conditioned idea of our identity. And then that idea of identity thinks for us, rather than our own mind. But if we zoom in on that cycle, we can see that this is in fact an addiction that is self-destructive, because problems become the prize. This is where our need to create dramas come from, and why we secretly love and demand them. This is helpful to understand why so many want peace, but secretly they do not like it and are at war with peace. The idea of peace is more appealing than actually having peace. This discovery also helps us understand why we can be so easily manipulated by ourselves and others. When our need to prove is more important than our own mind, then we find ourselves lost to our conditioning. When we are sleeping, dreams occur, and in our dreams, we have no needs or things to prove, unless it's a nightmare, of course. But in our waking life, we are constantly weighed down by this need to be right. This need to be right makes real problems and invented problems or paranoia about things unlikely to happen. The need for problems, dramas, even the need to be right is something that people say makes them feel alive. People tend to think to be alive is to be busy. In this, there is no time to think or question what is actually going on in our psyche. All these vicious cycles keep us distracted and tired to even bother to question this cycle, especially when we see others struggling with the same things. Then with it comes the misconception that this is normal and part of what it means to be human. But it's all invented by our conditioning and ideal concepts of the sort of person we need to be and what life is about. That is like checking for problems in our side mirror before hitting a tree. People often think life is about drama and problems. Problems are one thing, but when we make a drama out of the problem or a problem out of a drama, then we are amplifying the problem, making it worse than it is. This is where we often invent problems, because of our pictures in our mind. How we perceive the problem and how we react to it is what brings the drama. It's like a house of mirrors, in which our perception is distorted, and we end up thinking something is a problem when it actually really is not at all. Oftentimes, we entertain these phantom problems with imagining how we will act and react when we think it's true. For example, a person being suspicious and paranoid because they think people are talking about them or conspiring against them becomes a story, and they get an idea in their head so much, and when they start to speak to others about it, there tends to come a need to protect the story they have in their head, to the point they must be right. They must feel right, like it's true, and they know what is happening as they further convince themselves and try to convince others. But the more the person tries to do this, the more it becomes apparent to others that they are addicted to this story and the need to be right. Welcome to Planet Answers, where ideal meanings govern what answers we will promote, both for ourselves and others. For example, a person who is conditioned to think the meaning of life is, God created everything, so I need to be a good Christian and then I will go to heaven, without thinking what it will be like once we get there. Will we even like it? We associate having answers and formulating conclusions with success, but today we have more answers than ever before. We have a computer that can type any question and have the answers. Then why are we still struggling? Why are answers not enough? Why is the trophy never enough? Why are we so afraid to lose our meaning, trophy, and answers/beliefs? Why do we make answers our trophy and meaning our authority that think for us, rather than using our own mind? Why does the fear to lose these things make us want to fight? What exactly are we fighting for? We are fighting for the limbo of meanings. It's a vicious circle that repeats the pattern all over again and again and again. History repeats itself, and humans are still struggling with the same problems over and over again. And so the war between so-called good and so-called bad continues on. But often, most of the time, enemies are inventions. If I were to ask you, or anyone, what do they prefer, peace or conflict? Everyone would most likely say peace. However, almost every moment of our lives, inside our mind, we are given the same options. Yet, we always choose conflict. How can this be? We pick our side of who we think we are, what we should stand for, and anyone or anything who is not this, we call our enemy. By choosing sides, we then find reasons to fight and single out our enemy. Group identities create and justify war. When we convince ourselves of who our enemy is and of the accompanying justification, we then move on to recruiting other warriors. This gives us consensus, consolation, confirmation, and even a reward for the victory, and with that comes the idea to play the imaginary victim. This is the final stage of this vicious circle before it starts all over again. What did we really win? It looks like only the patterns win, never us. We are just the casualties. Enemy, victim, switching roles in our psyche as well. This ideology has been so encouraged and ingrained in us for such a long time, it's hard to imagine any other way to be. We think this is just how the world is, and that there should be balance, but trying to maintain a balance prolongs the game as well. Are there other options than playing the enemy or victim roles? So, just like we create enemies outside of us, we also create inside ourselves enemies. Sometimes the people closest to us we make into an enemy while we are fighting with thoughts in our mind, and that we have made into an enemy as well. This is self-sabotage. It comes from wanting control without questioning why we want control and why it is so important to us. Despite the story we tell ourselves that we will win something if we are able to control, but if we look underneath, we can see that to want to control our invented problems is not natural at all. People cannot control nature no matter how hard they try. To attempt to control an animal or a child usually leads to a rebellion and a revolt sooner or later. If we try to control our mind, the same thing happens, a rebellion and a revolt, and before we know it, we are self-destructing yet again. Why? It's simple. Control is not understanding, it's not communication or seeing. What is? It's just a militant authority saying, do this or else, because we have been living this way for such a long time, which is like a backwards existence, self-destructing, devolving. As we sabotage ourselves, we also sabotage the world and nature. We are meant to evolve past these problems, not continue to feed them, so as to continue to go against nature. So now you know the process and the mechanics of what is going on as to why we invent problems and the many vicious circles we are stuck in. We do not have to be discouraged to see this pattern more closely, even though it's most unpleasant. We are not doomed to repeat these roles and games forever with ourselves and in the world. The more we understand this pattern, the more we can start to break it, just like with an addiction, and the more we understand it, the less we feel at the mercy of it. There is a way out of this mental rut. We can question this constant need in us to prove and invent problems and enemies. Do we really need to prove? Do we really need to have imaginary enemies? Do we really need to be dragged by and fuel these psychological wars? What's behind all this? some sort of need to be psychologically safe? Why are we so addicted to this idea? Is this something we really need, or is it another invention? Who are we without all these inventions? When we are inside and zoomed in on these vicious circles, it's almost impossible to study. Thinking and questioning in this way brings us outside and zoomed out of the vicious cycles so we can study the pattern without taking them personally and get caught up in them. We need to be objective. Okay, now that you know this pattern, let us see how you do in applying what you have learned here so to decrease your own psychological stress. Perhaps this gives you a better idea of how confusion works and why it is so imperative to study this, and it's much harder than it looks. This video is just the tip of the iceberg.